Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the organizers for putting on an excellent conference and for giving me the opportunity to give an extended view of artificial intelligence. I am senior scientist in the Rijksmuseum, which is the Dutch National Museum of Art and History. I'm also a full professor at the University of Amsterdam, split between science and physics, and humanities and conservation and restoration. So this is going to be an unusual presentation because everything I'm going to be doing today is live on the web. You can see here, this is just a web page. So 100% of what I'm doing here is real time. So I was asked at the beginning to talk a little bit about my work on the Night Watch with artificial intelligence, but then I mentioned that actually I've been using artificial intelligence. I should also say that all the software I'm showing now today is software that I wrote myself. So it's not that I am a representative of a team. It's just one guy at the Rijksmuseum who's making this. So I hope to show you some public uses, some less public uses of artificial intelligence. There's an emphasis here on utility for art history as well as art conservation. So to begin, I think the reason that I was originally contacted is because of my work on the Night Watch. So the Night Watch is Rembrandt's largest painting. It's sort of the national icon of the Netherlands, and it's essentially the whole building was designed around this painting. So it's 4.5 meters wide, 3.8 meters tall, so that's 17.2 square meters of painting. We're in the middle of what's called Operation Night Watch, and Operation Night Watch is a multi-year, two-phase project. The first is now complete, and that is a research phase in which we're using every existing technique for imaging to image the painting. We've gathered 56 terabytes of data for this one painting. And the second phase, which we're about to enter, is the so-called conservation phase, in which we're using all of the data that we have collected and analyzed, also using artificial intelligence, to help us plan the best possible treatment for this painting, because it really is one of the most important paintings in the Netherlands and possibly the world. So as part of my work for this project, I endeavored to create the largest image of a painting in existence. So to do this, the extra challenge was that this happened in front of the museum public. 60% of the visitors to the Rijksmuseum come to the museum to see this painting. We have an amazing collection, 7 million objects, but still, this is what brings people to the museum. And as a consequence, we cannot take it off display if we're going to image it or do conservation work. So we designed a robot with an 8-meter long arm that's attached to the wall behind the painting. It moves a camera, the world's highest resolution camera, all over the painting. I programmed the software, which is now a hidden use of artificial intelligence. So this camera will be collecting 5 micrometer resolution photos. And what that means is if you move 1 pixel to the right in the image, you're moving 5 micrometers to the right in the painting. And that means that one of my pixels will easily fit inside of a human red blood cell, which is 8 micrometers wide. So I have a depth of field in the painting of 1/8 of a millimeter, and this depth of field means that if the painting is outside of a tiny sliver of space that is 1/8 of a millimeter thick, my photo will not be sharp. So I have to have artificial intelligence to predict how the painting is moving, because it's a 17.2 square meter sail in the gallery, because there's air currents that are constantly moving it back and forth. And then when I take a photo, I have to ensure that it is perfect, sharp everywhere, that the lights have gone on correctly, and so on. And then finally, I have to stitch this together into a single 5.6 terabyte TIFF file. So these are all hidden uses of artificial intelligence, but I want to start by showing you the kinds of things that you can do if you're harnessing artificial intelligence to do your imaging. So I'm not sure if it will be visible. Yes. So there's a scale bar at the lower right corner there. So let me show you the kinds of things that we can see with this image. This is all streaming live over the internet. Okay, so now we're at 1 centimeter, but let's go further and further and further and further. and still further. So this is 250 micrometers. That's 1/4 of a millimeter. At this scale, I can see individual paint pigment particles. I can see the 3 pigments that Rembrandt had on his palette that he thought he was mixing together but were not perfectly mixed. You can see that this whole feature is only 1.5 millimeters wide. If I zoom around, I can see individual pigment particles that show me, for example, that this is smalt. This is a cobalt glass that's ground up to make a pigment. I can see the self-portrait that Rembrandt painted of himself here, peeking out between. And we can also use this to investigate the so-called mystery of mastery. Somehow Rembrandt knew that to make the glint on the eye, he only needed to make these 3 little brushstrokes. So here you wouldn't recognize, oh yeah, clearly that's going to make an eye look shiny. But here, you see it. I can see conservation issues. For example, there is a conservation problem in oil paintings in which lead from the ground layer or the paint mixes with potassium in the linseed oil, and it forms these tiny particles called lead soaps, little white spheres, and they grow over time, and over time they surface, they emerge on the surface of the painting, and they look like a pimple, like this. So again, this feature is only 1/3 of a millimeter wide. And then later they fall out and they leave behind a crater that then fills with dirt that gives a very unattractive appearance to the painting. We can see history of the conservation treatment. For example, here is the only girl in the painting. And if I zoom in far enough, I can see the work of a restorer in the past who has covered up this little blemish. Or here. We can even see places that reveals Rembrandt's preparation technique. For example, here is an area where, due to the beautiful resolution of the image, I can zoom in far enough to see the exposed canvas. If it's possible to turn off the lights in the back, I think it would make the visibility here better, just for this one presentation. Is it possible? Is it more visible now? Yeah. Thank you. So this image is 717 gigapixels. It's almost 1 million pixels wide and 700,000 pixels tall. And so this is not something we would have ever dreamt of doing. It would not have been possible with artificial intelligence. But still, this image, when it was shared online from my own server, within the first month had 196 million IP addresses visiting this. So the reach of the museum in bringing people to the museum, of course not everyone visits the museum after seeing this, but now people think, oh, that's cool, and I can now see the Night Watch in a way I never could have in front of it. A more traditional use of AI is here. So these are works on silver from the 17th century in the Rijksmuseum, and at this time, starting from the 14th century through to the 18th, the end of the 18th or 19th centuries in some places, when a silver maker would make a work on silver, they of course had to be a member of a silver guild, and then when they wanted to enter the guild, they had to make a masterpiece, and then this masterpiece would enable them to have a master stamp, the so-called maker's mark. And then every work that they made would have a stamp on it that showed who made it, and then it would go to the guild who would assay the silver and make sure that it was the right grade, and they would stamp it with the city mark of the guild. For example, here you can see Utrecht, or here Den Haag. And then they stamped the letter of the year that it was assayed. So this was a rotating font, A through Z, and then a new font, A through Z, and then a new font, and so on. And then finally, when it was assayed, it might have a tax mark like this so-called rampant lion. So you can imagine that this is a wealth of information. When you have an object, when a collector finds an object, they would love to know what these marks mean, but oftentimes they are scraped, damaged, polished away, only partially punched, and many of them look very, very similar. So in this application of AI, I have made an app where someone can take their cell phone, they take a picture from the cell phone, They upload a photo that they've just taken, and then this goes to the server, and the AI automatically recognizes what silver mark this is. So here it says this is a maker's mark from Jonas Gutje. It gives a confidence score, so in this case it's extremely confident. It shows the top 10 ranks, so it thinks, yeah, this is not so confident, that's a probability, so definitely not. And then it shows a number of examples, because we're not trying to replace the expert, the connoisseur. Simply, we want to give them superpowers to find other marks with which they can make such an assessment. Moving on to public-facing, or staying within public-facing, somewhat more traditional uses of AI. Watermarks on paper are a thing that serves a similar role. A paper mill will put a special piece of bent wire in the paper mold that they're using to make the paper, and this makes the paper a little thinner there. And this means that if you hold such a page up to the light, or if you put it on a light board that has light showing from the bottom, and then you take a picture from above, then you can see the maker's mark, and the watermark, and this will then allow one to see when the paper was made, and this can help to identify the artist and the trade routes and all sorts of things. So it's a wealth of information, but the problem is that the objects that we would like to identify have ink on them. So it's not just a nice, clean piece of paper with a watermark. That would be trivial. Instead, we have something that usually has ink on the front and the back because paper was expensive. So here is a neural network that was trained. This is a kind of paradigm in which I wrote a physical model to simulate how ink discolors a page on the front and the back, how the paper color discolors the ink that you would see when light shines from the back of the page through the paper, and so on. And I've trained a neural network so that someone can take a picture. I'll upload 5 images here from the wild. It uploads into the site, and then this is the so-called magic eraser. So this takes this image here in, and it outputs this image here. So it removes the ink on the front and the back while leaving behind all of the paper texture. So for example, this is what goes in. A well-trained eye could easily see this watermark, but still it's a good example. You see that there's a stain. You can see that the ink on the front is black and the ink on the back is blurry and a different color. And then what comes out is this, where now anyone, not even an expert required, no expertise required, can then see this watermark, and then the next step, which I don't have time to show you today, is then to put this into an artificial intelligence to do the same kind of recognition problem that I showed you with the silver. So this comes in, this goes out. Different scales work, doesn't have to be text, it doesn't have to be iron, gall, ink, and so on. This goes in, this comes out, and so on. Using imaging to show hidden features is another common theme of the work that I do at the Rijksmuseum. This is a beautiful drawing. It's only 14 centimeters tall by Rembrandt. It is thought to be of his wife Saskia, who passed away the same year that the Night Watch was completed. And it's maybe not Saskia because she was quite high class, and this is showing a woman dressed in peasant's clothing. So maybe she dressed up for Rembrandt to draw her, but in any case, you can see it's quite an interesting work. It has ink and in small lines, and then there's a kind of wash. So what we did here was to take raking light images. That's where you take a photo, and instead of the light being in front, the light comes across, and this is designed to heighten the three-dimensionality. So we took several of these, but not in a scientifically controlled manner because we didn't have the equipment. And then this was put into an artificial intelligence that I wrote to analyze this stack of raking light photos, some from this way, some from this way, some from this way, so the light was moving around, and then to separate out the appearance that comes from the color of the actual color of the paper from the appearance that comes from its three-dimensionality. And that allows me to show you now what this would look like if there were no ink and if the light source were attached to the mouse. So here I'm putting the light source on the left side of the object, so it's coming across this way as you would see it. And now you can see that these vertical patterns, those are the so-called blade lines that were part of the paper maker's mold. If I put the light source up here, coming down from the top, now you see these occasional horizontal lines. Those are showing the so-called chain lines. You can see, and I can zoom in here too, you can see exactly how the heavy use of the ink has caused the fibers of the paper to adhere together and to make the paper a little bit puckered here around this area where I'm moving my mouse now. We can further see that apparently he used a different writing instrument, because now you can see subtly, maybe I'll zoom out to show this a little bit better. Yeah, that's a good view from the top. So you can see that these scribbles here have actually made an impression in the paper. The paper is slightly lower because he switched his writing instruments. We can see details of the conservation treatment that's happened here. And so this is a way, it's just a tool to give the user kind of superpowers. You could do this, you could still understand this if you had the object and you moved a light source around it, and then you would use your own understanding of how light and paper interact to show this. But now I can really show it very clearly, and I can use this to convince others what I'm seeing and to make nice comparisons. Here are two additional uses of artificial intelligence. The drawing on the left is a new acquisition by the Rijksmuseum by a really interesting Dutch artist named De Weert. You can see it looks very Italian. And then on the right is a print that we thought might have been made by tracing the original. And so the first thing that's happening here is that artificial intelligence is allowing me to make a semantic alignment between the two, because in fact, as you can see here, they are not perfectly aligned. There are some things that the printmaker has changed. Architectural details, for example, down here. You can see this little niche in the staircase is different. The printmaker has changed the perspective dramatically, and so on. But using this raking light technique, now I can also, since I can back out the shape of the paper by having the AI see what it looks like when I move the light source around, I can actually render the paper in such a way that now there are multiple colored light sources around it that thereby enable me to see that, in fact, the paper has these definite marks in it from the action of tracing. So here you can see there are clearly tracing marks here, even though the original has since been modified. So again, it's just a way to see something that was otherwise hidden using simple photos, no special equipment, in which we moved a light source around in front of the work. Continuing on along the theme of showing hidden features, a lot of times in the painting world, we take X-rays, just like a chest X-ray for radiography, of paintings. And usually that's to see if there are hidden features and so on. But one thing that you do see when you have a work on canvas is that the application of the ground layer, this is a preparation that happens before the painting is actually painted. So we don't paint directly on canvas. Instead, we apply a smooth layer to it to make it nice, uniformly colored and nice to paint on. That makes this ground layer thicker between the threads and thin on top of the threads. So if you look very carefully, you can see where the canvas marks were in a canvas, where the threads were in the canvas. So if you use artificial intelligence to extract that pattern and to show the spacing pattern between the threads on a canvas, you can see that there are manufacturing defects. So these two paintings were recently purchased in a joint agreement between the Dutch government and the French government. These are Rembrandt's only full-length portraits, Martin and Opien. These were a newly married couple. Believe it or not, they're only 22 years old here. So we age differently now. And this analysis showed that, in fact, they were originally cut from the same roll of canvas. So here, there was a question, do these really belong together? Is it true that they were painted together? And so here, you can see that the canvas threads are perfectly matching each other, as indicated by the spacing map. So these are spacings in millimeters. Red means there's a lot of space between the threads, and blue is a small space between the threads. So that's interesting. And then we can also analyze the angle of the threads. And the angle of the threads shows a pattern like this. So if I take my shirt, imagine that I've stitched two canvases together, and I pull them apart like this. Then the threads where they're stitched are going like this. They have variable angles. And then when we prepare a canvas for painting, we lace it up. They would have laced it up and stretched it inside of a big wooden frame to make it very taut so that they could paint on it. So you can see here that if I look at the painting of Martin, that there is cusping here, here, and here, and a different kind of cusping. This cusping is the sort of scalloping of the angles that you see here. And then for the woman, open, you see cusping here, here, and here, but a different kind here. And in fact, if you look carefully, you can see that the pattern of angles here, so these are light and dark according to does it lean to the left or does it lean to the right, that they mirror each other. So we are able to reconstruct the fact that these two canvases were originally sewn together into a single piece when they were prepared for painting. Looking at the craquelure in a painting is quite interesting. This is the Annunciation from Van Eyck in the National Gallery in London. And this is work that I did with a student at the University of Amsterdam, Audrey Boivin. And here we have an artificial neural network that knows how to recognize cracks. So we can see that cracks come in a variety of geometries. These are so-called drying cracks, where you see these three-way intersections. But if I would come up here, you can see that the crack geometry is much, much different. So we're excited about using this for art crime investigations, because in many cases, forgers will attempt to make a new painting look old, but there's a very particular way in which the craquelure pattern evolves over time when the wood, in this case it's on panel, when the wood would expand and contract and so on. Here is a hidden, somewhat trivial use of artificial intelligence. This is a newly acquired object, so-called Kunkel glass. This was made with a robot that only cost me 50 euros to create. It's out of an IKEA turntable and a Raspberry Pi and a little stepper motor. So this object is, it's a beautiful object. But the problem is that none of it is symmetric. So if you put it on the turntable and then have a turntable that rotates and then you take a picture and it rotates and you take a picture and so on, the problem is that the object moves all around like this and it looks terrible. So here an artificial intelligence has been used to center the photos so that now when I spin it, you can see it is, we're seeing the object and not something that's very jarring because it's moving all around. So it's detected that the stem is consistent, that is symmetric, and now everything is centered on the stem. This is, it may take a little while to load, but this is the same object I showed you originally with the silver marks. This is one of the most important objects in the Rijksmuseum. It appears in more than 75 paintings in the 17th century. Dutch paintings of the 17th century. So we had a whole exhibition about this style. It's the so-called auricular style, the earlobe style. And so I was asked to make a movie that would open up this exhibition 5 meters wide. So this is the first thing that you see. And we took the photos for this movie because the request was that it should be 45 seconds long. Okay, so we took individual photos, moving the camera around, to make a 45-second movie, and then the director said, oh, that's great, can you make it 3 minutes long instead? So we'd already done 6 weeks of photography, and this would mean, well, no, we can't. So instead, this has been made 4 times longer by using a technique called neural frame interpolation. So what we have here is that 1 frame in 4 is an actual photo, and then you have 3 fake ones, and then a real photo, and 3 fake ones, and so on. So we could artificially expand it to 4 times its original length, and hopefully you can't tell which photos are the real ones and which ones are the fake ones. So essentially we can save ourselves time when we're doing photography. Talking about corrections to what might happen in a photography campaign, this is the Milkmaid, another famous work by Vermeer that's in the Rijksmuseum. We've also done 5-micron photography here, but we didn't have a robot, so it's really difficult to get perfectly sharp photos. What I can show you here, though, is on the left, you see the original photos that we took. And then on the right, this is something called deblurring. This is an artificial intelligence technique that knows how to fix bad photos. So in this case, this is a little tuft that is not really supposed to be sharp, but just to show you how effective the technique is, you can see there's this little tuft of canvas that pokes up on the upper left corner. And then on the right, you see what the neural network can reconstruct about its original appearance. So for example, I think if I go over here, I may find that I have something blurry, and then I can make this sharp. I can again resolve pigment particles if I do this. We often do a lot of chemical scans, and so this is a technique called macro X-ray fluorescence. This essentially moves a quite expensive device over the surface of the painting. It performs X-ray fluorescence, in which we bombard the painting with X-rays. And instead of measuring the transmission of the X-rays through the object, like when you have a chest X-ray, instead we induce temporary electronic transitions in the atoms that are within the painting, regardless of where they are, how deep they are, if they're on the surface or if they're hidden. This emits X-rays, the so-called fluorescent X-rays, and then we collect the X-rays and analyze them to see where there's lead, where there's phosphorus, where there's iron, where there's arsenic, and so on. So we can make element maps, as you see here. But the problem is that low concentration elements give us a kind of a noisy mess like you see here in the middle. But we know that that's not how the paint was distributed. The paint was distributed by a painter. It's not a pointillist painting. This has brush strokes. So what we can do then is use an artificial intelligence to do denoising. It's a kind of restoration technique where we are able to use the artificial intelligence to show us what it might have looked like if we had spent longer analyzing this, months and months analyzing it instead of one day. So I've been zooming in, but now I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There was quite an interesting discussion yesterday about digitization and should we put things online. And so I would like to advocate, yes, please digitize things and please put them online. I originally was attracted to come from the United States, I'm American as you can probably hear, to work at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam because they were the first museum in the world to make 100% of their image collection free online for anyone for any use. In the meantime, the Metropolitan Museum of Art has followed. The Museum of Modern Art has followed. You have open collections like the Web Gallery of Art and WikiArt and so on. So what I've done here is to gather 2.3 million open access images. So I have permission to have all of these on my server. And then I've built an artificial intelligence search engine. The thing that may be particularly interesting about this for you is that I have not collected any metadata except that I know where I took the image. So there is no labeling here whatsoever. This is just a big pile of 2.3 million images, but this allows me to use English to query it. So for example, I will now search, let's say I want to find a woman wearing blue holding a musical instrument. So this is just running on the server under my desk back in Amsterdam. So I say a woman wearing blue holding a musical instrument, and this is what I get. And you can see it understands across different modalities. This is a sculpture of a woman. I could ask for a particular media, so let's say a sculpture of a person holding a musical instrument. And here are sculptures of a person holding a musical instrument, some quite abstract, but still, this is what I want, right? Things that you would never expect to be able to find, for example, rotational symmetry. Okay, so it also knows some art history, style of Escher. Okay, so there's Escher pictures with rotational symmetry. A sad dog. Sorry to bum everyone out, but oh. To prove to you that I'm not using metadata to search, I'm going to search for something that would never appear in any metadata. Medieval laptop. Or how about medieval airplane? It's not wrong. How about I look for a Blanchard painting of Paris? I choose Blanchard because he was an impressionist painter who painted lots and lots and lots of scenes of Paris. That was his whole commercial shtick. Okay, so I've got lots of Blanchard paintings of Paris. Let's suppose that I think, oh, I like this one, I want to search for this one. What I can do here is copy the image address, and instead of a phrase, I can put a URL. So now I'm going to have it suck up this image and find me other things that are like that. Okay. But I don't really have time to explain. I would be delighted to during the questions. But what I can do here is, instead of querying in the space of 2.3 million images centered at this one, I can lean in some direction. So let's suppose I say, well, that's good, but I want more snow. And so this is now a mixed media query. I've queried simultaneously with an image and some text. Or I say, how about warm, glowing cafe lights? And now I get Blanchard paintings that are like this one, but which have more warm, glowing cafe lights in this. So you can imagine that this aids discoverability of these collections, because digitization is not the end. For me, digitization is the beginning. So what do you do when you've digitized your collection? Well, you make it searchable like this, and then people are seeing things in the museum that they never would have known how to search for because it's not in the metadata, but it's still instantly accessible. So, okay, I have a search engine that can use text to explain images. I don't need any metadata, and I have a 717 gigapixel image of the Night Watch. A lot of people ask me, well, what is up with this? Is this like the cult of resolution? Why would you collect so many pixels? It's absurd. No person could ever look at 717 gigapixels, but an artificial intelligence can. So that's why. So what I've done here is use the same search engine technology to search for a photomicrograph with small white spots on a red background. So instead of surfacing top results, what I can do is, for every one of my little 14 million tiles that I have at 5 micrometer resolution, I can ask the AI, how does this tile compare with this query? Is this a good match for this query, yes or no? And so here I see on the right a heat map, and there's the query at the top, a photomicrograph with small white spots on a red background. And what this promises is that if I zoom in to the 5 micrometer resolution where this is lighting up, that I will in fact see a photomicrograph with small white spots on a red background, for example. So now when a conservator who is thinking about how to conserve the Night Watch is zooming around and they find an area of concern, they can just search for that everywhere else in the painting. Because when we design a treatment protocol, it has to apply uniformly. And in fact, that's what I'm going to show here. So I have 14 million tiles, as I mentioned. That means that for every one of these 14 million tiles, I could compare it with the other 14 million tiles. So that's 196 trillion pairwise comparisons. I can divide that in two because comparing A and B is the same as comparing B and A, but it's still about 100 trillion comparisons, 10 to the 14th comparisons. So I've done that with an AI, and now wherever I put the mouse here on the right, it's showing me a heat map of everywhere else that looks like that. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. So for example, here I'm querying an area that clearly has exposed canvas. We can all recognize that easily. So now, having clicked on that, I can go to the other areas that are lighting up, and the promise is that indeed, when I go here, for example, I find exposed canvas. So now I don't have to know how to describe what I'm saying. I just show the computer and it finds me all the other places where that happens. In the interest of, well, I'll go fast because I still have 15 minutes by my count here. So I have told you about these chemical scans, and the chemical scans tell us about the pigments that the artist used in building up the painting, and this chemical scan technology lets us see behind the painting, not just what's on the surface. We can see lead no matter where it is in the layers. So what you're seeing here is an artificial neural network that has been trained. I'm a material scientist originally, so I understand the connection between structure and processing, so how the painting was made and how it looks. And so what you're seeing here is, along the top row, the night watch, the map of the copper in the night watch, the mercury in the night watch, and the lead in the night watch. And then at the bottom, what I've done is train a neural network to guess what the color would be based upon only the chemical scans. So now we're looking down here at this corner. And so you can see that based upon the chemical scans, it thinks that there should be a little red flag here tied on the end of this thing. And that is consistent with something else that you see Rembrandt doing. For example, here is a red flag. So apparently this is something where there was a red flag and then this was painted out by Rembrandt. Or this guy here who's next to the self-portrait. You can see that the AI is seeing that in the chemical evidence, there used to be a feather coming off of his cap. So we can reconstruct the hidden painting. And then along the bottom row here, you can see, based only on the appearance that you can see when you're zooming in, so these pigment particles looking down into cracks and so on, this is the guess of the chemistry of the painting. So this is where the neural network expects the copper to be without having seen the copper, where it expects the mercury to be without having seen the mercury, and so on. Mercury, for example, is interesting because this is associated with a pigment called vermilion, which is this very obvious color here. So you can see the network is now helping me to possibly skip 56 days of chemical scanning that we had to do for this thing. Again, zooming out, this was also a test for this big image viewer. I mentioned that when you digitize your collection, the problem is we have a huge collection. So this is 370,000 works on paper in the Rijksmuseum, all of which are open access. Most of them will never be seen by someone who's just explicitly searching for something because it's not in the metadata and there's too many. But here is a neural network that's taken every one of these works on paper and organized them according to similarity with no metadata into a single image, so that when the network thinks that two images are similar, it puts them nearby each other at full resolution. So here you can see Rembrandt self-portraits. Or over here we see, I think, farm animals, if I'm not mistaken. Or churches, boats, and windmills, or the figures that Rembrandt used when he was learning how to depict people holding their weapons in the night watch. So for the last two things I'll show you, the night watch, coming back now to the night watch, it's an interesting story because the night watch as we see it now is not the way the night watch looked when it was originally painted. It was painted for the so-called Kloveniersdule. This was the meeting hall of the various civic guards of Amsterdam. And it was painted in 1642. In 1715, so after everyone had probably already passed away in the painting, they decided to move it from this room to the Stadthaus, the city hall. And the room in the Stadthaus where it hung, where it was to be hung, had a pair of doors that were closer together than the width of the painting, and it had a short ceiling that was shorter than the height of the painting, so they cut off all four sides of the painting. So the way we receive the painting now has the four sides cut off. If you're wondering why it has this border, this is because the painting was slashed in 1975 by a madman, and the reparation, the repair of the painting, they had to add a new canvas to the back. So this white border around the actual night watch is not original. Now, the good news is that the main figure here, Bonning Koch, liked the night watch so much, remember it's 4.5 meters wide, liked it so much that he commissioned another painter to paint a small copy, only 80 centimeters wide, to hang in his house. And this is before it was cut down. So that's what you see on the right. So the first use of AI here is to make a direct comparison between the two. And you can see in this visualization, this is what I call rolling registration. So wherever I put the mouse, it's going to align the two. Again, you have the actual Rembrandt on that side and the copy on this side. And so the question is, to what degree is this faithful? So here you can see, yeah, the details are quite faithful. If there was a bead, there is a bead. If there was an eyelash, there was an eyelash. But you can also see he's no Rembrandt, right? So there's lots of distortion. And in some cases, the distortion is quite severe. For example, here on this figure. Essentially what's happening, by the way, is wherever I put the mouse, it's going to align the two there. And then I can show you bouncing back and forth. For example, this figure, you can see that his arm goes in and out like this. Or if I focus on the pole arm, now you can see the pole arm is staying in one place. So I was asked for the in-between time between the first stage of Operation Night Watch and the second stage of Operation Night Watch, would it be possible to show the public what the painting might have looked like if it were not cut down? So an actual museum display around the night watch. So yeah, sure, let's try. So the first step of that was to really map out this so-called semantic correspondences. So as you saw, that these are painted with different scales by different artists with different pigments, different ways of depicting things, and so on. But there is still a strong semantic correspondence, meaning that if you see the tip of a spear in one painting, you also see it in the other. If you see a glint on an eyeball in one painting, you also see it in the other. So this is a map of the more than 10,000 correspondences in meaning between the two. So the first was that. And then the second was to, so we can sort of immediately align them as closely as possible semantically, but that's still not a good alignment. So as you can see here. So the next step was to use a second neural network to warp this image so that it really is in geometric correspondence with the original. So this is the copy turned into this so that now it does line up with the night watch quite closely. And then the final step was what I call send the neural network to art school. So now we have two paintings that are aligned with different pigments, different styles. One has chiaroscuro, the other not, and so on. But they are aligned. So what I can do is make thousands and thousands of training cards in which I have the way the copyist, Gerrit Lundens was his name, the way the copyist made one, and on the back the way Rembrandt painted the same detail. So now I can teach the neural network, for example, this is how Lundens painted something, this is how Rembrandt painted something, and this is in the middle of training. This is the neural network's guess about how to translate from the style of the copy into the style of Rembrandt. So this is what the copyist did, this is what Rembrandt did, this is what the neural network thinks it would look like if you translated this into the style of Rembrandt. So I have a way of checking And what that meant is that ultimately I could teach the network to translate from the, so first I took this, then it became warped, then I could translate it into the style of Rembrandt. Of course, I cannot capture the genius of Rembrandt. I'm not trying to. I just want to make it believable for the parts that he cut off. And then ultimately, I arrive at this, which is a reconstruction in which you can see I have retrieved the missing parts. So the middle is Rembrandt, and then the outside is the AI reconstruction of the copy. So to show you what's going on here, sorry. Confused here. This is where the night watch ends. I've cut off the extra border from the newly added canvas. And then this is the reconstruction. So hopefully, when you're looking at this, you don't obviously see where the transition is from one to the other. So what we got was these new figures here that came back. These were cut off. Rembrandt highlighted the importance of different figures according to how saturated the colors are and how bright it looks. So these were not particularly important figures. Now you can see that it's a whole new composition. Now Bonning-Kalk is leading the company out to defend the city of Amsterdam. You know, it's like the world's first movie poster. And another nice thing is that in asking the AI to reconstruct the style, it also imagines the craquelure. So it really tries to make everything as faithful as possible. And then we actually hung this around the night watch. The New York Times made a beautiful article about this. So we printed this on canvas, and then that was mounted, that was varnished and mounted on some aluminum pieces, which were then hung around the night watch. So here is the assembly as the pieces are moving around, and then ultimately, for 4 months, the missing pieces were actually there, not ever touching the night watch, only 2 millimeters ahead, so that now in the between time between the research phase and the conservation phase, the public could come and see what it might have looked like if the night watch were not cut down. And to finish, I would like to show you the thing I'm working on most recently. It's the same database with 2.3 million images, but now this is a real-time search that's happening from my webcam. 4 times per second. So what you're seeing down here in the lower right corner, right here, is what my webcam sees in my hand here. And this is 4 times a second, a real-time search into these 2.3 million cultural heritage objects. So if I pointed at a chair, I hope it will show me chairs. If I pointed at an audience with lots of people, it will show me that. If I show it a hand, it shows hands. If I make a fist, it shows, sorry, the perils of real-time demonstrations. There's a fist. If I show my hand over my face, it shows photos from MoMA with hands over the face. And any of these could be paused, and then I could go search, and this will take me, in this case, to the Museum of Modern Art. So it's a link back to the museum. And this is especially interesting when you're using this to walk around a museum. This lovely book that we were given here has a picture of the Hungarian Holy Crown. Oh, I have to turn it back on. And the internet dies. Yeah, we've lost our internet connection, so it's showing me only the images that it's already, there we go. So now you can imagine that if you have your museum's collection online, then when someone walks around, and they point their phone at the thing that's in front of them, they immediately see that, and they see all of the other sister objects that are online in the museums of the world. So it's a kind of real-time connection to the culture between the real world and the culture of a museum. So here's glasses, bottles of water, and so on. And this is just happening with the server that's under my desk in my office in Amsterdam. So I hope I've given you a sense that artificial intelligence can give us superpowers, that it can be used to put things directly in front of the public in a very obvious way, to help us to extract more information from the images that we collect, to link images together, to make them more findable, and to help us in our mission to help the world access, preserve, and understand its cultural heritage. Thank you.